So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here in the house and those out there in cyberspace joining me this evening. Tonight's topic was inspired by a cold, rainy night. And so I came up with the title, When It Rains, It Pours. Not an original phrase, to be sure, but nevertheless, I'm tangled up in my cord here. There we go. A nice way of saying that when things come to us, they seem to come to us in great measure, like a hurricane sometimes. Of course, sometimes we get a great measure of wonderful things. It's an interesting thing that things do seem to pile up on us. And rather than being evenly distributed through our lives, we go through periods where things seem to be very overwhelming. And that may be due to innumerable factors. I tend to think of the astrological factors, those phenomena in our astrology charts that indicate or that correspond with the movements of planets through the houses of the astrology chart that give us periods where things get very intense and indeed sometimes overwhelming. And so the question is what to do in those times. And the first thing that always comes to my mind, and that I all too often I think have to remind people of, is to attend to their own well-being on a regular basis. And the first thing I always think of is to practice transcendental meditation twice a day. Those of you that may do other forms, certainly if you find them relaxing and rejuvenating and centering particularly, I would encourage you to do those too. But I'm most familiar with transcendental meditation and have found through decades of practice, wow, it's fun to say that. It's been a long time. Somewhere out in cyberspace, if you use my name, you may find a video of me talking about how practice of transcendental meditation got me through medical school and particularly through residency, where I was on call every third or fourth night and usually would only get, if I was lucky, 2 hours of sleep. And so there was a great deal of just plain physical demand and a great deal of mental demand because I had to be very attentive to what was going on. And so I learned that meditation could be an enormous help under those particularly trying circumstances. But of course, as life has gone on for myself, and I'm sure all of you can relate to the idea that there are times when even our regular practice of meditation and other things that we do don't seem to be quite enough. And that, the demands that are placed upon us by whatever challenges we face really seem to take a toll and make it very difficult to navigate in those circumstances. And so I'm going to try to provide tonight some ideas, some techniques that you can use to manage those stressful situations, and then also talk a bit about the energy work that I do, and then we'll actually have our group clearing session where we tune into some particular challenge that we are facing perhaps, or have faced, or maybe think we're about to face, and try to clear some of the energy around that. In my work, the dealing with the physiological load that challenges place upon us is relatively straightforward. Sometimes even I can tune in to the karmic influence that's there, the astrological influence even, and deal with that to some degree. But sometimes, and the second thing I often think of when people are under great challenge, under really great stress, is the use of Maharishi Jyotish consultations, that's Vedic astrology, and the use of yagyas, which are Vedic performances that change the karma, that change the influence of the time that we're in so that we do not have to suffer as much. And when we pay that karmic debt, either by meditating and transcending the karma, we can think of it as kind of washing past us as if we duck a wave. If you think of, I don't know if you've swum in the ocean or in a very wavy lake, and you learn that if you stand up against a wave, it may knock you over and really send you tumbling. But if you simply dive under the wave, dive into and under the wave, under the base of it, that it just washes past you and you don't really feel it. And so you can think of yagyas as kind of doing that kind of a phenomenon where they lets the wave of karma wash past without bringing a disturbing influence to you. So the Marsha yagyas are extremely effective, and I have seen them used in innumerable situations, particularly health situations, because as a physician, that was the area I was most interested in. But they have altered things where people were suffering financial losses or great family discord or problems and other such situations that were extremely challenging. And particularly in the health arena, it can be very, very dramatic. And I've seen them used in people who were in intensive care and, just hanging on to life by a thread, as we sometimes say. And then they just turn it around and they suddenly start to get better. And doctors are often amazed, that they're really ready to tell the family that, this is not looking good. And, you need to be prepared that this person may not pull through. And then all of a sudden, their physical condition starts to improve. And it's not very long before they're out of the ICU. So I've seen that many, many times. It's very convincing, and it's a wonderful thing to see. It works in situations that are chronic, of course, also, but I'm thinking now mostly about rather acute situations as I'm talking about it. And the same goes for emotional situations, grieving or other forms of emotional upset, loss, divorce, and other kinds of things, or just, what we might call baseline conditions like anxiety or depression, where people just really are overwhelmed by what's going on, by their physical situation and mental situation that they're not able to control or get a handle on. Yagyas can be absolutely marvelous for transforming that. So I bring some considerable emphasis to that, both because it's a really humane thing to do if you could possibly manage to be able to do them, have them done for you, of course. And I think you look up Maharshi Vedic astrology and you get the link then to get a consultation, and then they order the yagyas like that. So it's a really, really effective way of dealing with things. And I think it's the merciful way of dealing with them. There's no point in suffering needlessly. It's a wonderful thing to be able to know that there is a possibility of rather immediate relief. It's not always 100%, but at least it's enough so that it ceases to be so overwhelming, and it makes one feel much more comfortable and able to resume one's normal activities. So I emphasize that a great deal. Now, as most of you know, I did Ayurvedic medicine for many years. I trained with Vaidyas, the Indian experts in Ayurveda. And the Vaidyas always emphasized several key points about managing great challenges in life. And the first one is get enough rest. And that's a very, very, very important thing. Most of us stay up too late at night. Those familiar with Ayurveda know that there are cycles through the day that repeat 3 cycles, and then it repeats 3 again. So each of them is 4 hours long, approximately, and it varies a little bit with the seasons. So people who tend to stay up late, they stay up in what's known as the Pitta time, Pitta Kala. And in that time, the body's activity, the body's metabolism actually increases. So if we are asleep, then what the sleep does is metabolize the experience of the day and the experience of our life, the influences that are on us, both obvious and more subtle. If we stay up in that time, we tend to feel refreshed. Once you get past about 10:30 or so, most people find that they actually feel enlivened, and that's a physiological effect. It's a natural thing. And then you can stay up quite late. The problem is that you haven't given yourself time to metabolize that experience, and then you fall asleep and things get into a very dull period, and then you may wake up feeling quite dull and lacking energy. Young people can get away with this better than people, more my age, but it's a good thing for people of all ages to get to bed early, preferably, and I know this is hard for some, preferably before 10 o'clock, which is roughly the beginning of the pitta time. So we want to fall asleep in the kapha time and then wake up early and begin our day. So early to bed and early to rise, the adage makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, is a actual physiological statement. It's literally physically true. So just putting in a big plug then for getting to bed early, but definitely for getting enough rest, getting enough sleep, because it's very hard to deal with challenges when we're not feeling rested. I just can't emphasize that point enough. The next thing the Bhajas, the Indian experts in Ayurveda, always recommended, of course, was a good diet. And when we're under stress, that physiological response, the stress response in the body, weakens the digestion, weakens the power of our digestive system. And therefore, eating a diet that is more easily digested than we might ordinarily eat is very much advised. And eating at regular times in the day, in Ayurveda, 2 meals a day is sufficient. Some of you may want breakfast, or you may find that breakfast is not so necessary. You can just see. But the food should be easily digested. So avoiding things that are very heavy, very greasy, very sweet is definitely advised. Diet, exercise is the next one. Exercise is very important to keeping the physiology enlivened and balanced. And of course, in Ayurveda, we recommend moderate levels of exercise, not exercising to exhaustion, not overdoing it, but getting enough exercise. And our modern lifestyle is actually not particularly conducive to getting enough exercise. And it requires a fairly conscious effort on most people's part. Unless you're doing physical labor as your profession, as your occupation, unless you're doing physical labor, you really need to plan to get exercise. And it should be moderate exercise and several times a week. It doesn't have to be every day. 3 times a week is probably not adequate. And a little exercise every day is a good thing. So, if you have that built into your routine, that's a really wonderful thing, to exercise every day. We already talked about stress management. Purification is the other category of maintaining the physiology. When we're under a lot of stress, when we're feeling very challenged, it really is valuable to purify the physiology. Typically, that can be done in the simplest thing to do is simply to do a light fast. Absolute fasting is not a particularly good idea when we're stressed, but a light fast, meaning eating food that is exceptionally easy to digest, like soups and juices and teas, can be very, very helpful. So sometimes doing some purification, particularly if you find that digestion is very weak, or the body feels very heavy or stiff or sore, and there's pain in the body, then physiological purification is a good thing to do. And Ayurvedic herbs and many other companies put out, many other traditions put out herbal preparations and other things that can be very, very helpful um, for dealing with stress. And Maharishi Ayurveda Products International, known as MAPI, um, have a number of things that I like to use for people that are available. You can just order them from mapi.com, mapi.com. Stress-free mind, or if it's more emotional, then stress-free emotions. The two products are kind of similar, but there is some difference between them. And one is a little more for the nervous system and just settling the nervous system. The other one is a little more effect on the fine feeling level, on what's known as sadhaka pitta, the heart value. There, you can see it now in the picture. And some people respond extremely well to these herbal preparations and feel an almost immediate effect of of taking these herbal things. And I recommend them very highly. For overload, also Vata aroma oil is one of my favorites from MAPI. It's you can put it in a diffuser or just put it on a tissue. And allow yourself to be aware of the smell, to be able to smell it. And it's extremely settling. If you're having difficulty sleeping, it's a good one to use. They also have some preparations for sleep, but I find myself that Vata aroma is really excellent. But you can look on the website and see the different preparations, and whatever resonates with you, certainly you can use. There is a Vata tea, which is very good. Also a worry-free tea, which is doesn't taste quite as good to me, but it's not bad. But it's very good for settling the physiology, particularly when anxiety is the principal problem. There are also worry-free tablets, and I like those very much also. I generally recommend the stress-free mind or stress-free emotions, but worry-free is an excellent product. And when worry is the main component of one's challenge, then that can be a very valuable thing as well. I like to use the stress-free mind or stress-free emotions, and then worry-free tea. And Vata aroma oil is a combination. And most people will respond to those fairly well. There are some other things that we can do, which can be extremely valuable. And there's a little exercise that I'd like to show you right now, which is something I think just I can demonstrate that now, and you can pick it up and use it yourself. And that is when the feeling of overwhelm comes. I suggest first of all, you have to recognize that it's coming. And the problem with most of us is that we simply give into it. It's there, and it's like a wave that's washing onto us, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. But the technique is to recognize when it's coming on, when the feelings are coming on, when they're growing and starting to, like, oh, I know what's going to happen now. I'm going to feel overwhelmed and very upset. And, the reactions may be different. Some people will feel very nervous. Some people will feel very sad, maybe feel like crying. Some people will feel like tearing their hair out, and some people just get angry. It just depends on different reactions to the situation. And that has to do with your constitution and the nature of what's going on, of course, in your physiology and in your life. So you sit and you recognize, and you just look at it, as it were. Usually you close the eyes and just feel it coming on. When I say look at it, it's on the level of fine feeling. Feel it coming on, and just say hello to it. And don't try to push it away. Just accept the fact that it's there. That already is an exercise, just looking at the thing coming, because usually there's a great deal of dread because you know it's coming. You know how bad it's going to feel. And so the trick is to just look at it and accept it. And one of the things you can do, I learned this trick from Robert Smith, who developed faster EFT, emotional freedom technique. He developed a very quick way of doing it, and it's very, very effective. And that was to, even with your hands, if you like, imagine that you're taking hold of it and you move it a little further away from you, just beyond arm's length, or even a little further if you like. And just let it be out there. And so now you can look at it. It creates some space between you, the witness of your experience, and what you're experiencing. And so you can look at it and say, oh, there it is. And hello, I accept the fact that you're here. And then you just pay attention to it. Just pay attention to it. Just sit with it. And let it know that you're just going to sit there without judgment. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're not trying to tell it how it's supposed to be. And just accept the fact that it's there. And sometimes it'll have something to tell you. It may start talking to you, or you might even have that feeling like you'd like to ask it. Is there something you want to tell me? Don't ask why. We never ask why, because that gets off into a story. We just want to be with the thing. And sometimes it'll say something to us. And we can just accept the fact that, oh, it's trying to say something. You just let it know that you heard that. Oh, yeah, I understand that you're feeling very upset. And you haven't, you feel very unsettled. You just can't sit still inside there. And so you've been very restless and keeping me up at night. And that's okay. We just let that be. We just accept the fact that that's there and just let it be. So it's a very simple technique to do it that way. There was another trick that Robert Smith taught, which I like very much also. And that is that if the experience still seems overwhelming, even when you've been able to move it away a bit, and now it's sitting out here, you can imagine like it's an old television set where you could control the black and white. There was a knob. Some of you are old enough to remember that there's a knob on the TV, and you could turn the color off and make it a black and white image. And so turning off the color, you can just imagine in your mind, you can even reach your hand out and imagine that you're taking hold of that knob and you're turning. I'm going to put my hand up there I go. Now you can see it, and you just turn the knob and you turn off the color and watch it in black and white. And just having that notion in your head that it's now a black and white image rather than a color image often dials down the intensity of the effect. It's an extremely effective technique. And it's but sometimes it's absolutely surprising how quickly that changes the intensity of the feeling. So moving it away, and if necessary, making it black and white, can be very, very helpful. There are other techniques that relate to the same idea. If you can imagine that you're having a tape deck and you can control the speed, and you can slow the tape down so that instead of it being very fast and talking, as if it was talking very rapidly, which it might be as you're experiencing it, it could be a very fast speech. You just let it slow down a bit and make it more comfortable. You don't have to slow it way down, just, a little bit slower so that it's moving along at a comfortable pace. So that's a very simple technique that you can use. I'm not going to try to teach faster EFT in this time frame. That takes some practice. It usually takes about an hour. I'm happy to sit with people to do that kind of thing. It's a very effective technique. Also, a technique called focusing can be very helpful. And another one that I can show you right now, though, that is very, very simple because it just has 4 steps, is what's known as the option method that I learned by reading a book. Actually, I read 2 books by 2 different people, but one was written by a psychologist named Barry Kaufman. I think he was a psychologist. It's been a long time since I read the book. But he tells this story, and I'll just tell you the story so you see how the thing works. His story was that there was a big family reunion, and Practically everybody was there, and his grandmother was there. And his grandmother was afraid of flying, and everybody knew it. And it happened that they saw the weather report. There was going to be a storm, and in order for everybody to get home, traveling a distance, they would have to leave, fairly soon, and Grandma would have to fly the next day if she was going to make it out and get home in time. It wasn't going to be possible to drive the way she had come. And so, in front of the entire assembly of family members, Barry says to Grandma, "Grandma, are you afraid of flying?" And there's kind of a moan in the group because they all know that Grandma's afraid of flying. And Grandma says, "Yes, I am. It's a terrible thing." And Barry says, "What is it about flying that frightens you?" And that's the key question. What is it about this thing that bothers you? And so Grandma says, "Well, I'm afraid the plane will crash and I'll die." Now, this is where it really gets important because most people would go like, "Oh, yeah, she's afraid of dying." Barry asks the question again, "Grandma, what is it about the plane crashing and you're dying that bothers you?" And this time, Grandma has to think for a moment because she's never really gone beyond the idea that she's going to die. And she thinks about it and she says, "Well, I'm afraid I'll be thrown from the plane and the rescue team won't be able to find me." That was a very interesting response. But he continued, "Grandma, what is it about the plane crashing and you're dying and your body being thrown from the plane and you're not being able to be found that frightens you?" And this time, Grandma really has to think. And after a bit, she comes up with the thought, "I'm afraid that wild animals will eat me." Okay, Grandma, what is it? And then he repeats the whole thing. And it's very important to repeat the whole thing because it's like connecting the dots. You're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the reasoning. And so, Grandma, what is it about the plane crashing and you're dying and being thrown from the plane and not being able to be found and wild animals eating you that really bothers you? And Grandma comes back after a bit and says, "I'm afraid that God wouldn't find me acceptable." And then Barry says, "Grandma, you've been a devout woman praying to God all your life. You go to, I think it was synagogue actually. You go to whatever the church was, and you've been very faithful. Why do you think? No, I'm sorry, not why do you think? Do you think that the God in heaven, who is a compassionate and caring and loving God, would reject you because wild animals ate your dead body?" And Grandma was on the plane the next day because she finally got to the core of what was inside her fear. And she understood what it was that she was afraid of and realized it had no validity. It was based on something that wasn't even real and definitely was a remote possibility. But it returned her to a rational perspective of flying. Yeah, a plane might crash, but it really isn't likely. So, and you might get thrown from the plane and not found. And it's really less likely. And wild animals might eat you, and that's even less likely. But that God wouldn't find you acceptable? No, that's not likely at all. That's not possible. And so it was a myth. The whole fear was based on a myth that she had long forgotten, if she ever even really consciously knew it. But it was a whole sequence of things. So it is possible to do this on your own. Sometimes it helps to have somebody else ask what is it about that bothers you? And then eventually you get down to, is that true? And then if they say yes, you say, how do you know it's true? And most people can't actually come up with a reason why it would be true. Anyway, we'll keep it simple. What is it about that? You can write that down. What is it about that that bothers you? And it can be very revealing, but you have to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper until you just can't go any deeper anymore, any further. Okay, so those are basic things that you can do at home. And I encourage you strongly that if things are getting overwhelming, if it's pouring and things are getting very wet, very messy, that you sit, collect yourself, get centered, take good care of your body, get enough rest and exercise, purification if needed, and use these techniques to pacify what's upsetting you, what's disturbing your equilibrium, so that you can deal with what is actually going on. And things really do happen, of course. We have illnesses, or parents or loved ones have illnesses, and that comes up a lot. And that simple technique, what is it about this? Supposing it's a friend who has an illness or an accident, they're hurt. What is it about this that is upsetting me? And we tend to say, well, because I'm close to them and, I really care about them. Okay, what is it about really caring about somebody that requires that you get upset, that you feel distraught? Have you ever thought of it that way? Have you ever stopped to think about what is it about this that's upsetting me? Why am I distraught that something's happened to a friend of mine? Stuff happens all the time in the world. We have to deal with it. That doesn't mean we don't care. But somewhere, I'm just dwelling on this one for a moment, somewhere we've associated caring with being upset. And so one of the little rules that we have in our head is, if I don't act upset, I don't care. Is that true? Probably not. Probably not true. So anyway, it was just a demonstration again, and just another example of how you might use that option method technique to get at what is behind what's going on. Because what you really want to do is to lend support to your friend, right? In a situation like that. If somebody's in the hospital and, you want to let them know that you care. Very good. Okay, so with that, I just remind you that I'm here to help if it ever is needed. If things are overwhelming and you can't seem to get on top or under your wave, as I used that analogy at the beginning, then set up an appointment. You can book actually online now. They're on my website, partnershipforwellbeing.com. There's a button labeled Book and Pay. You actually can book without paying if you're so inclined, but we'll catch up with you eventually. So anyway, you can book that way, or you can send me an email, and we can help you deal with whatever it is that's pouring down upon you. Very good. So I'm going to end this recording.